Thank you very much for joining. It's good to see so many of you, and we've got a number of items to get through today, but I'd just like to thank the staff for turning around all the comments from the very productive meeting that we had over in Lisbon in September. Seems a long while ago, but not if you've got a set of papers to produce. Ross, anything from you in terms of admin items before we start?
No admin items for me today, Ian.
Okay, that's great. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Edwin to take us into the natural resources item.
Thanks, Ian. So we're not having slides today because all we're doing is really looking at the changes since September. So the plan at this meeting is just to look at those pages, so almost like a limited page flip. And then barring any issues that come up, the plan for December is really to have the final approval of the draft IPSAS. So without any further delay, I'll just walk through the document right now. And the first change that I would like to discuss is on page 5 at the very bottom on subsequent expenditures. So this change also goes into page 6 in the following section. And it's really the changes to paragraphs 13 to 15 and also IG 15, which is in page 41. So this change relates to subsequent expenditures. And if you recall from September, we received an instruction to move what was in the application guidance to the core text. So that change has been processed. And also we have simplified the example that used to be in IG-15. So now it only focuses on capitalization of expenditures. The prior example dealt with an impairment as well. And we received comments from members that that was too complex. So I'll pause here to see if there are any comments from members just on these changes on subsequent expenditures.
Thanks, Edwin. Yeah, Angela.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Edwin. Are you taking comments on the relevant IG 15 as well as the core text?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the IG 15 that I have a comment. I'm in IG 15, I think we may need to clarify the fact pattern. For me, it's about a subsequent expenditure of after an asset is damaged. And I think prior to restoring it, or the capital expenditure to restore it, I think the fact pattern needs to be very clear that it lost service potential in the damage. Otherwise, it could look like repairs and maintenance. So the way IG-15 reads is the restoration cost, or after the damage, is capitalized because it increases service potential, but it may not necessarily. It has to lose service potential in the first place for that to be capital. Otherwise, it's a repair and maintenance, is what I'm trying to explain. So either and it does need to go through its normal A9 recognition criteria as well. But I think if you want to bring in a increase in service potential from a restoration, I think the previous fact in the example needs to show that it lost service potential. Otherwise, it's a repair and maintenance. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Angela, and I saw support for making that change. So if you've got Gali has any specific drafting suggestions on that, perhaps you can liaise with Edwin on that. So I think if we content to make those refinements for the reasons you outline. Okay, Edwin, not seeing any other hands raised, so move us on to the next point.
Okay, the next point is on page 6, and it's paragraph 16. And all this is in the previous version, the explanation that current value in this context needs to be current operational value has now been moved into the core text. So it's really just a simple change. And then we also deleted the AG, which explicitly said that because now it's already incorporated. So I'll pause there for comments.
Thanks, Edwin. Not seeing any hands raised, so I think we're good with that one. So move us on to the next point.
Okay. The next point is on page 9 and also on page 15. So at the September meeting, we received an instruction to add a transition paragraph dealing with items that used to be in PP&E, but now have moved into this draft standard. And we've added that transition paragraph in paragraph 75, which is on page 15. But we've also added or amended paragraph 46 because previously there was already a paragraph on reclassification. So we have just added the wording on the transition relating to a valuation reserve so that both paragraphs are now consistent. And I'll pause there for comments.
Thanks, Edwin. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Edwin, it's really related to the reclassification rather than on transition to the new standard. I was just wondering, when I was reading the updated to the reclassification section, it struck me that with governments or public sector entities holding significant land assets, they may be used for other purposes or holding for other purposes now, like supporting infrastructure or agriculture or some other PP&E 45. But I wondered in the next decade we might see more governments repurposing land to either conservation, held for conservation, maybe for ecological or climate reasons. So I wondered, rather than just addressing classification going out of IPSAS 51 into another standard, I wonder if we should acknowledge and provide guidance on repurposing of land from other standards into IPSAS 41.
Yes, so so when we drafted the reclassification paragraph back in the ED stage, our thought process was that if you're coming from another standard, then that guidance would be in that other standard and you wouldn't necessarily be in the ED already. So that's why it was only one way, it was coming out of the ED. But now that we have the transition paragraph, which is essentially coming from another standard, I see your point that maybe this reclassification should also be both ways as well. So I see Ross has his hand up.
I just wonder if maybe this is something we could elaborate on the BC to make Angela's point. Because to your point, Edwin, it's a little odd if the guidance is in this standard telling you how to transition from PP&E, whereas the BC could make the point, we've put the transition guidance that's normal for such a standard, but as the standard gets understood and countries understand and manage their assets, there might be transitions out of PP&E for these types of items that they want to conserve.
Thanks, Ross. That sounds like a sensible way forward. Okay with that? Because I think it's good to acknowledge the issue in that way. Okay, thanks for that. So Edwin, move us on.
So next we are moving to the application guidance, and on page 16, the first major change is really just a deletion. And if you recall from before, when we had the residual scoping approach, there was a flow chart illustrating how the standard worked. So in September, there was agreement that the flow chart is no longer needed after the scope was clarified. So now that has been deleted. So I'll pause there and get feedback from the board.
Patricia.
Yes, I could go back for the paragraph in core text because sorry, I could back. I can back to the paragraph in core text. It's 2 comments.
Which where are you?
Yes,
Patricia?
in paragraph 61, C, 61C.
Is this one of the changes that we're covering, or
Yes, it's covering in measurement in core text.
sorry, Edwin, can you just locate, because I'm confused now.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
this is,
I'm confused. Yes, sorry, Ian.
sorry,
I'm
this is on.
confused because I understand that now you will be in the AGs,
Yeah.
and my comment is before the AGs.
Sorry, so this is on page 12 and 13. There was a drafting comment in September where we removed some text on measurement disclosures.
So is this one of the points that you want to cover at
It's
Edwin? Because
not one of the
I'd
major
rather
points.
actually pick these up. I'm going to come back at the end for any other points. So Patricia, if you're okay, we'll pick that up at the end. But I want to just go through in logical order the changes that Edwin's highlighted, and then we'll come back at that point and we'll just walk through the standard and pick up anything else. So if you're okay to hold until then, Patricia.
Yes, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Edwin, back to you. So I think we were on the flow chart. So just check if there are any comments on that. Okay, so if we can move on then to point 5 on your table, Edwin.
Okay, so the next change, major change is the unit of account. So the comments we received was that the unit of account really impacts scoping, recognition, and measurement. So what we've done is move the application guidance to the very top of, or to the very front of the section. And it really talks about how when you look at the standard, the first thing you need to do is figure out the correct or the appropriate units of account. And then each unit of account is subject to the scoping requirements. And then if you're in the standard, you would apply the application or the recognition and measurement guidance. So that's in paragraphs AG2 all the way down to AG6 on pages 16 and 17. So I'll pause there for comments. You're muted, Ian.
Sorry. So Patricia, you're on units of account, yeah? Okay,
Yes,
go for it.
Yes, my question is about the unit of account is because the way that I approach the unit of account in core text is different the way that I approach the unit of account in the AGs. Because in the core text, I identify the natural resource health for conservation based on the definition. And after they identify the asset, I use the unit of account to decide about the aggregation, disaggregation. But in only for the natural resource health for conservation. The decision that we made in the last meeting, we decide about the title, we decide about the definition, and the definition has enough characteristic to identify the natural resource health for conservation. Here, in the application guidance, I use the unit of account to identify the natural resource health for conservation. I think it's not necessary because the definition is enough to identify the national resource health for conservation, and it is the same approach in other IPSAS. And I think it makes the core text and application guide so confusing because I have 2 different approaches for unit of account in core text and in application guides. If the decision, my position is to return the approach that we have in the last version. But if the decision is to include unit of account as a way to identify the natural resource held for conservation, I need to change the core text to and retain the paragraphs about the unit of account to decide about aggregation, disaggregation in the core text and the application guides. My position is to use unit of account only to decide about the aggregation and disaggregation. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Edwin, to you.
Yeah, so I guess I can see merits in both approaches because this area is so new that constituents might need help figuring out how to split a resource into the various assets. So that's why we did the AGs this way. And I agree with Patricia that if the board decides to stay with this approach when we talk about asset classification, then the core text would also need changes. So it would really involve moving paragraph 12 to the very front of the standard, because right now it's in recognition. And we would talk about unit of account and classification as a tangible natural resource held for conservation. And I was looking through the other IPSAS to see if there's any precedent for that. And it is actually done in IPSAS 16, where we talk about whether a piece of land is or a property is investment property or PP&E. So there is precedent for that in other IPSAS.
Thanks, Edwin. Ross, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think I can see Patricia's point, and the interesting situation. Maybe there's a middle ground where we take the portions that Patricia is referring to and repurpose them as an IG. So you're still giving some guidance, but it's not unbalancing the AGs versus the core text, and would help people with this issue in a way that they'd still have some guidance, but not in the way where you'd have to unbalance the text between what's in the core text and the AG on this.
I mean, it does seem that we need to, I think we need to agree an overall way forward on this. And it does seem, I think there's going to be a bit more work that needs to be done offline just to make sure that we are consistent, along the lines of essentially either of those options that you suggest, Patricia. So just take other comments on that. Sunjin.
Yes, actually, this is not a comment, but actually, this is question back to Patricia. So when you were referring the core text, are you talking about paragraph 12 or other part of the core text? Because when I reread paragraph 12, it clarifies that item is one thing and unit of account is something different. So it clearly mentioned that some of the items may include several, so have to recognize based on the different unit of account. So I don't know. That's maybe my personal kind of bias reading, but to me it looks like it is clearly separated about the unit of account versus item in core text. So I was reading paragraph 12, by the way.
Patricia, back on that.
Yeah, yes, the question is in the rationale, it's not only about the location of the paragraph, but the rationale in the core text. The rationale is the board decides about the definition. Definition has enough elements to identify natural resource held for conservation. Then unit of account is not used in the core text to define if an item is natural resource held for conservation or other assets. And because of this, the paragraph about unit of account is in the recognition, because the decision about the aggregation, disaggregation, if I consider land, trees, and other resources as unit of account, or only land or only trees as unit of account, is in the phase of the recognition, when I decide about the recognition criteria and measurement. And then this paragraph in this text is about this. In the AGs, the unit of account is used to say there are tangible natural resource, all tangible natural resource, and I use unit of account to decide if the tangible natural resource is held for conservation or not. It's different approach here. And in my view, I think it's not necessary because you have the definition. Definition indicate the characteristics that I have to consider to identify a natural resource held for conservation. And I have illustrative examples that present the situation that region A and region B has different configuration. This different configuration, one is PP&E and another one is natural resource health for conservation. In my view, it's not needed to change the approach about unit of account related to the last version. But if I decide to change, I need to have a cortex use unit of account to classify the assets, and I have to continue to have the paragraph 12 to identify the unit of account in the context of natural resource health for conservation. And this is my point here.
Okay, thank you. Edwin, can I just ask you to clarify with the precedent in IPSAS 16, what would that, if we followed that precedent, where would that position this paragraph 12? Would that move it up into the scope section?
So in that standard, it follows the scope section. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, I mean, sorry, I don't think we have a lot of time to debate this. But I think the proposition would be that we relocate that paragraph higher up, so that essentially, then as consistent with the previous discussion, that it is about scope. And then if we made that move, and I know that's not your preference, Patricia, in terms of how we do this, but I think this is, there is a particular situation with this as a public sector specific standard, then that would create the consistency that I think you're looking for between what's in the AGs and the approach that we agreed in September. Edwin, is that a reasonable summary?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we will need to have a separate offline discussion with those who are interested if we do that piece of surgery, just to make sure that it does actually hang together. But I think the proposition would be that to create the consistency, we move it up from recognition where it is at the moment to, the scope. Is that okay? And then I think what I'd suggest is those members who are interested in just making sure we get that drafting done correctly, if you can contact Edwin, and we'll have a separate call when Edwin's just processed some proposed drafting, and we'll make sure that we've actually landed that consistently. Okay. Fine. Okay, so we'll do that. So that's an instruction, Edwin, that needs to be addressed, and we'll come back and make sure we're happy with that at the very beginning in December. Okay, so then move us on then to point 6.
Okay, so the next point is on heritage assets and also on scope. So in September, we made the decision to reintroduce the amendments to heritage assets or to the description of heritage assets in IPSAS 45. So that amendment has been added back on page 29. But going back to AG 8 and AG 9 on pages 17 and 18, we've now amended AG 8 and also added a new AG 9 to clarify scoping. So to clarify the differences between heritage assets and tangible natural resources held for conservation. So I'll pause there for comments.
Okay, thanks, Edwin. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Edwin. I like what you've done with AG 9. I think it's clearer and more helpful. I suppose the one thing that that does continue to cross my mind is a situation where land or a conservation park is held for conservation, but it also has public access. I'm very sort of conscious that I looked right through the whole standard for a constituent who had that question. Do I need to carve out the public access bit? Do I need to look at the fact that the public access is only on certain tracks or in the wilderness and really 90% of it's not accessible? I just wondered whether we should, even if it was just by inference, that that issue is raised. And while I know we're talking about AG9, I did note when we get to AG12, it does talk a little bit about activities which constitute conservation. It could mean completely limiting access to that resource. On the other hand, it could require quite active rehabilitation, and conservation could involve actively managing growth or restoration. I did wonder whether there was an opportunity to at least give constituents an idea that perhaps you could still be holding land for conservation despite having some access for the public to enjoy that. I wasn't sure how to solve it, but I think it could be the most common, potentially one of the most common examples that people come across when thinking about applying the standard. And that sort of access to it while still being held for conservation, it would be good for it just to be acknowledged somehow through the standard. Now, I haven't spotted anything, but it may well be in here. That could be the issue, that I haven't spotted it.
Thanks, Angela. Edwin.
So right now in AG8, it doesn't address this exactly, but then we do talk about looking at all the relevant facts and circumstances to determine the primary intended purpose for holding the asset. So I wonder if maybe I can expand on that to talk about, if there is mixed use, you have to apply judgment to determine what the primary
I mean,
purpose is.
I think in looking at this, I think probably I'd suggest we take this offline. I wonder whether this isn't more IG actually. So I think I'd suggest that we examine that as an option rather than start tinkering with the drafting in the AG. Because it feels like an application of, it's a particular instance. And I take the point, Angela, that this could be quite prevalent. So if we can just take that offline and agree that as a, see if we can do that as an IG. Okay, thanks. So move us on then to the next one.
So the next change was so the next changes are all on definitions, and it's really expanding on what is meant by manage and prevent degradation in the context of conservation. So those changes are in paragraphs AG 12 and also AG 17 and 18, and those changes are on pages 18 and 19.
Thanks, Evan. Okay, not seeing any hands raised, so we think we're fine with that. So move us on.
So the next change in AG 30 on page 22 is really just a relocation. So there used to be discussion of deferred consideration in the core text. And at September, there was an instruction to move that to the application guidance. So that's all I did.
Thanks, Edwin. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we're good with that.
So the next few changes in box 9 of the paper is all on BCs. So I don't think I'll go through each one individually, but then essentially I've changed the BC paragraphs to talk about all the changes that we have made since September.
Thanks, Edward. Any points members want to raise on those changes? Okay, that's good. So then we move on to 10.
So the next change is on unextracted subsoil resources. So in September, there was discussion of whether this IG should be in recognition or whether it should be in scope. So right now it has been moved to scope. And I phrased the question so it deals with scope and recognition. So that's now in AG5 and AG6 on page 39.
Thanks, Edwin. Yeah, Claudia.
Thank you. I would like to add something on AG5, where we talk in the first sentence saying something about unextracted subsoil resources are typically extracted for the economic benefit for their use or sale. I would add something in the future because otherwise we wouldn't talk at all in this standard about this topic, because that seems unextracted subsoil resources. That means maybe in the future, otherwise the sentence sounds like they extracted now.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. Edwin?
Yep, I can add that in.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Um,
Okay, so not seeing any of the hands raised, so move us on then, Edwin.
Okay, so the next change is we've added an IG on the reassessment of unit of account. So that has been added to IG 19 to 22. And essentially what we did was there used to be an IG that talked about, a forest fire, and we've expanded that into its own discussion. So now we talk about how you have to impair the asset, and then you have to, if there has been a change in use after the incident, you have to consider whether it is still within the scope of the standard.
Thanks, Edwin. Claudia.
Thank you. It's maybe in the similar direction like Angela said something before. It's AG21. I'm not sure if in the case of this destroying something, we talk about impairment and it's not a disposal. And if we reforest, then we have an addition and not a reversal of an impairment. I think we should a little bit be careful that we use maybe the right wording, that we came to the right conclusion. In this case, it sounds for me, I would dispose this part, a partial disposal of this forest, and then with an addition later on.
Thanks, Claudia. Edwin?
So we landed on impairment because technically you still own the property. It's just that now the value has decreased substantially because of the forest fire. So I didn't think you would actually say that you have disposed of it, because that would imply that it's no longer under your control.
Edwin, but then we should make clear that the unit of account include land and forest, and not only the forest.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a very helpful clarification, and I see nods to that. So Edwin, if you can just work with Claudia on that to get the clarity on the drafting on that, please.
Yep.
Underlines the importance of unit of account. Okay, not seeing any other hands raised, so let's move on then.
Okay, so the next change is on page 43, and we have added an IG on the exchange of assets. So in terms of this IG, all I really did was explain in a more readable form what the AGs were trying to say. And I didn't really change the AGs originally because that wording has been carried forward all the way back from IPSAS 17 to IPSAS 45. So I didn't really want to tinker with that wording. So right now it is just really explaining how that application guidance paragraph works.
Thanks, Edwin. Karen.
Thanks, Edwin, for that. And now I'm feeling a bit stupid now you've provided that explanation, but I think it's really helpful to have this IG in there, but I really struggled in understanding it. So I didn't know whether, maybe I should know whether non-monetary is something that we use consistently in IPSAS. I mean, I can see we were talking about non-financial assets here. I wasn't entirely clear what non-monetary meant. And the other bit that I struggled with a bit, where it talks about the COV of the acquired tangible natural resource held for conservation, is if it's more evident. I didn't know what we meant in terms of more evident, or how something might be more evident in these circumstances. Just a couple of bits, do we use non-monetary elsewhere? If not, could we not just say non-financial assets? Because I think that's what we're talking about, if I've understood it rightly. And what do we mean by more evident in the context of this example? Thank you.
So we do say non-monetary in other IPSAS. I can send you the references to those after the meeting. In terms of more evident, I think it's an issue of being more reliably measurable than the other assets. So if for some reason you're not able to measure the fair value or the current value of the assets you're giving up, but you can measure the current value of whatever you're receiving, then you would use the current value of whatever you're receiving. So it's more of an issue of, I guess, the ease at which you can measure something. So that's what they meant by more evident.
So it sounds like there's just some clarification that's required there, Edwin, just to make that point.
Mhm.
Okay. So move us on then.
Okay, so the last change, the last major change is on page 51, and that's really the comparison table with GFS. So this was really amended or added to be consistent with the GFS project that Joao will talk about in a bit.
Okay. So I think with that, we're through the specific points that you'd raised, and we've collected those two issues that need further work. But then, as promised, we will now just have a final walkthrough in case there's any other points to pick up. And Ross, would you be able to just lead us through this on a section by section basis? And then we'll pick up any final points, because I know, Patricia, you had one. So just in case there's any other final points we need to pick up and address.
Yeah, happy to do that, Ian. So to orient everyone to the right place in the papers, we're going to agenda item 1.3.1, which is the draft final standard. And we'll start on page 4 of the document, which is page 4 of the PDF as well. And that's objective and scope. And then moving on to page 5, which is definitions and the start of recognition.
Yeah, Claudia. Claudia?
Yeah, sorry. I would suggest to add an entrance sentence to paragraph 10. Paragraph 9 ends up there's a resource needs to be measured reliable. And paragraph 10 starts directly when an asset is measured at its current value, the current value is reliable if something. But in the whole, there's no linkage about if we measure at cost, that it's always reliable or something. So it's just from one paragraph to the other, there's I would something like a bridge that you get. Oh, we only just talk about the specific problem with current value because with cost we don't have an issue. I miss a little bit the linkage.
Edwin?
Yeah, so this is something that I spotted as well. So I can I'll work with Claudia offline to make sure the wording is right.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So moving on, we'll move to measurement on page 6. And that runs through page 7, page 8. And on page 9, we get
Noyati.
Actually, I just want to reverse back at page 6. It's about initial measurement. I think in para 16, for me, why put the thing is shall be measured as a deemed cost, and then there is a bracket on current operational value, because the next sentence is already explained that the measurement should be under the IPSASB 46, which is under the current operational value. So it's supposed to be that para 16 for the non-transaction shall be measured at current operational value instead of put it there as a deemed cost and then the bracket of current operational value.
Thanks, Noyati. Edwin?
Yeah, so yeah, I can change that. I think what we were trying to convey is that you are required to use deemed cost, and if you apply 46, deemed cost in this context is current operational value. So I can change the wording to make that clearer.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Edwin.
So back into the page flip. We're back to page 9, derecognition. Halfway down the page. Then presentation starting at the top of page 10.
Claudia?
It's together page 10 and 11. It's paragraph 51, letter D, double I, and 7, the last one. We have a reclassification, a reconciliation of assets held for sale. That it's D double I. And in the last paragraph, we say we have a reference to paragraph 47. And paragraph 47 refers to assets held for sale. So I think there's a wrong reference on one component. We should check the references, please.
Thanks, Claudia. So Edwin, if you can pick that one up.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. So Ross, back to you.
Yep. So just continuing down page 11, 12, 13.
Karen.
Thank you. In paragraph 63, which is about the disclosure of the different classes of tangible natural resources, I just wanted to check in on the thinking around this, because if I've read it correctly, it's saying that the classes that you have are informed by the level of estimate uncertainty. And if I've read that right, my question is why we do that with natural resources and perhaps don't do it with other types of assets. I don't think we have similar kinds of classification requirements in PP&E. So it's a consistency point here, just checking on why there is, whether I've understood it correctly and why there is a different approach being suggested here, if so. Thank you.
So, yeah, so paragraph 63 was actually based off PP&E. So we really just recontextualized it in terms of tangible natural resources. So this is really when you're using unobservable inputs to value something. So even in PP&E, this situation could arise.
Okay, so if you can just look and see if there's a tweak to the wording there that would just, make that clear. Okay, so Patricia, to you.
Okay, paragraph 61C. I made a comment in the last meeting that there is no additional valuation technique than cost approach or market approach. My suggestion was only to delete all the use of an additional valuation technique, because the rest of the text, the text deletes about how to disclose the change in the techniques continue to be applicable. And then I think you need to return some text here in 61C. And the other paragraph is 64. In paragraph...
Sorry, Patricia, can I just stop you on that, just to finish off on your first point? Edwin?
Okay.
Yeah, so Patricia's right. I deleted too much of the paragraph. It should really just be deleting one sentence. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can fix that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Patricia, back to you.
Yes, in paragraph 56, the decision was to delete the requirements about to disclose COV when the asset is measured at cost. And but in paragraph 64 was retained, but it is about the situation that I delete in 56. Then my suggestion is to delete the 64 too.
Okay. Thanks, Patricia. I think point well made. Edwin, you can action that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So Ross, back to you.
Thanks. So we're back to effective date and transition at the bottom of page 14. That brings us to the end of the core text. Application guidance starting at the top of page 16. Scope on page 17. Definitions on page 18. Recognition on page 19. Through to page 21, where measurement starts. That runs through page 24, where presentation begins. And the end of page 24 is the end of the AGs. Page 25, amendments to other IPSAs. Page 26. Top of page 27, we have the amendments to agriculture. IPSAS 33. IPSAS 45, starting on page 29. And then on page 30, we have the start of the basis for conclusions. Then we have that running through page 31, location of guidance objective. scope, and definitions on 31. Running through BC's on recognition, starting at top of page 33. BC's on measurement, top of page 34. Running to derecognition and presentation at the bottom of page 34. Effective date and transition on page 35. BC's on application guidance on page 36. Amendments to other IPSAs on page 37. And then the start of the IGs at page 38. IGs on scope, page 38. IGs on definition, page 39, followed by recognition. Running through to page 41, where there's some guidance on how an entity should account for subsequent expenditure. Rewilding. And then on page 42, IGs on measurement. Through to page 44, section E, presentation IGs. And that brings us through to the illustrative examples that start on the page of top of page 46. And there's very limited changes here, just editorials. So that runs through page 49 with transition. And then the comparison table at the back of the standard on page 51 that we've added for Jim.
I'm sorry, I was a little bit late. It's 48. That's the illustrated example number 4, where the topic is what we want to clear is disclosure of unrecognized tangible natural resources. Illustrated example 20 to 22 explains exactly about the disclosures. I prefer to delete 23. The sentence already starts, if the land was not held for conservation, and then it explains it is not an asset, and then you don't need a disclosure. If it's not held for conservation, I'm not in the standard. It's nothing relevant if it's an asset or not. Maybe there are other asset definition and other standards. And if I'm not in the standard, have nothing to do with disclosure requirements. So it's more an example regarding scoping instead of this explaining what we have to recognize, what we've disclosed for unrecognized tangible natural resources.
Thanks, Claudia. Edwin?
Yeah, that was left over when we had the open-ended scope, so I can delete that paragraph. I don't think it's relevant anymore.
Okay, thanks, Edwin. So if you can do that, but also just check on positioning when you've clarified in that way whether it still remains in the right place. Okay, thanks. Ross, back to you.
That brings us to the end of the document, Ian, unless there's any comment.
Good. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for those comments. I think, that shows a very thorough review. Edwin, I think you now have a number of points to follow up with members bilaterally, and we will also just and it may be possible to do this through correspondence, just in terms of sorting out that point on the move of the paragraph on scope and so on, but I'll leave you to deal with that in terms of whether that needs a short call or whatever. I think with that, we are in good position then in terms of moving into December. I don't know if staff, you just want to clarify what we'll be doing in December.
Yeah, so the plan will be to have a paper on the approval of the final IPSAS, and also that will deal with the effective date and also talk about when essentially the effective date of the standard. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Edwin. So it literally will be going into the final approval process at that stage. I think we'll also be talking about feedback statement. Is that right?
Yes, so that is a staff document, but I believe that we will let the board have a review of the document and provide comments.
Okay, thanks. Because I think that's obviously very much about the communication in terms of bigger picture, how we've addressed the various different comments that have been made as we've gone through the process, and obviously particularly about the change made in terms of the scope of the standard. Ross, you want to come in?
I do. I just want to clarify the point that Edwin's made because maybe not all members have been around when we've done a feedback statement. So we don't do a feedback statement for every project. The board's feedback and thinking are captured in the basis for conclusion in high detail. What the feedback is more of a communication document about the major changes since the publication of the exposure to the finalization. It's more accessible. It's not meant to capture the detail that the basis for conclusions have, but to clearly show that the board has reacted to the feedback received on a proposed standard and in finalizing that, and we'll go with our communication documents. Because to be honest, many who use the standard probably won't go to the BCs to understand the board's thinking. So we use that to make sure on important and strategic projects, and this being a public sector specific standard, we thought it would be useful to make sure that some of the great communication points board members have continued to make as we've been finalizing the draft from the comments and capturing those in detail in the BCs are captured appropriately and communicated so that the positioning of this important standard is understood by the public. So again, it will be at a high level and you'll get a look at that in December to take comments, and then staff will finalize that along with the final standard after the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ross. I think that will be an important document for the reasons you've outlined. Okay, so that brings us then to the end of the first item on natural resources, and we are scheduled to take a break at this point in time. If we can break until 10 past, whichever hour it is for you, and then we will move into the climate-related disclosures project at that point in time. So thank you very much, everyone, for a good first session, and see you back here in sort of just under a quarter of an hour's time at 10 past. Thank you. Okay, so members can come back on screen, and then we will move over to, I think, Karen, you're going to lead off on this.
Yes. So moving on to agenda item 2 on climate-related disclosures. So the board went through 3 page flips in the September meeting to review all the changes that were made to reflect the separating the 2 standards and the changes that were made as a result of further alignment with own operations, and also as a result of the instructions that were provided to staff. So in this meeting, we'll have a review of the specific changes that were made after the September meeting to address the comments that were made by board members, and in the December meeting where will be a planned approval of the draft standard, and we'll also be reviewing the draft feedback statement. So the same way as the plan for the natural resources project that we covered in agenda item 1. And so in this meeting, we're first going to go through a paper on scope 3 and public policy programs. So that was to address one of the instructions that was made in the September meeting. And then Alex will lead us through the review of specific updates to the draft standard from September 2025. So we've grouped them again in a similar fashion as the September meeting, but we'll only be going through those specific changes. And so our the first paper is on scope 3 categories, and this was one of the board instructions that was raised in the September meeting, and it was to retain paragraphs that clarify that emissions from public policy programs are not a part of scope 3 emissions, and that member raised the view that an entity might try to include its downstream emissions from public policy programs in measuring its and disclosing its scope 3 emissions. And so as a part of addressing that instruction, we went back to the 15 categories of the greenhouse gas protocol, which you can see illustrated on this slide here, which include the upstream and downstream emissions in the value chain of an entity. And so what we looked at when we looked at these categories, we focused on 2 main things. First was whether there were consultation responses that were received on this specific issue, and whether a preparer would look at these 15 categories and reasonably interpret these as including the downstream emissions from public policy programs. And so if you've taken a look at the agenda paper, Appendix B provides a list of all these 15 categories. And you can see that these are designed for the public sector. So they focus on selling, so the sale of goods and products and services. And from the staff perspective, in our analysis of these 15 categories and in understanding them, they were provided to they were established so that they would provide a reporting boundary. So that's even for the private sector. So it's not intended to capture all value chain emissions, but to set those 15 categories and the reporting boundary of what an entity would look at within its scope 3 emissions. So we think that this would be the same for the public sector. So rather than trying to capture all value chain emissions, we would focus on the ones that are within the reporting boundary that is provided by these 15 categories. And so our staff analysis of the few key questions that we came up with in view of this instruction show that first, there were no significant issues that were raised by respondents to this issue. So there were no issue in terms of the understanding of whether public policy programs would be interpreted as a part of scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And in understanding those 15 categories, as you can see in Appendix B of this paper, we are of the view that a public sector entity that is applying a greenhouse gas protocol would not reasonably interpret these 15 categories to include or be associated with public policy programs. So we've actually tried to test out these 15 categories with some public sector examples. These are only staff developed examples to help with our understanding and yours as well. And I think the most important point is that we can't scope out what we don't know, especially in authoritative guidance. So the scope of public policy programs was identified as a key issue in our April review of the summary of comments. And so is the definition of some of the terms associated with public policy programs. And so it is a challenge for us to scope out what we will be discussing as a part of phase 2 of the project. And what we propose to address this instruction is to make this clarification through non-authoritative guidance. So that's through keeping one of the BCs on the public sector applicability of the greenhouse gas protocol. So acknowledging that the greenhouse gas protocol was developed for the private sector, as well as those 15 categories that they are developed for the private sector, and also adding an IG that is framed around the reporting boundary that is provided by scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So these will all be in non-authoritative guidance. And Andrew was the member who had raised this issue. He is absent today, but we worked with him on these recommendations and making these changes. And he was happy with these changes in general. He had some drafting comments, but we'll work with him on both BCs and IGs. So with that, I'll pass it over to the chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that additional work, Karen. I think very helpful in terms of the thoroughness of that. If you want to stop sharing your screen, and then what we'll do is just open up for comments and questions from members on that, analysis. Yeah, Karen.
From one Karen to another, but I'd like to say thank you very much for doing the Appendix B analysis. I think it was really helpful to do that, and I know separately I've kind of asked you the question about to what extent could we kind of share that as sort of IG, because I think people are still trying to understand what this might mean. It's an observation as much as anything arising from this is actually quite how difficult some of this is, and the line between what cost, the cost benefit side of things, and in fact, whether you would actually even pursue some of these things because there would be an undue cost or effort involved in doing so. I was looking at the end of life sold products, like the cars that go off, and you're supposed to guess the emissions of those who bought them. Oh, that's about as long as a piece of string, really, isn't it? So, I think it throws up some challenges here for the public sector is the observation. And so I guess the question that comes from that is to kind of, how do we acknowledge that challenge? Because I agree that we should try and align where we can, but I guess in the private sector, similarly have challenges with this too. But how do we guide people about how far is enough on?
I think we've lost Karen.
Yeah,
Ross, that you want to come in?
Yeah. Yeah, we have lost.
Karen's back. We lost you about 15 seconds ago, Karen.
Am I back?
No, I'm talking Karen Sanderson.
Oh, me, sorry.
Karen S rather than Karen L.
Too many Karens in the room. No, I think all I was saying really was, whilst I see the merits of private sector alignment, I guess the private sector has challenges with this too. And really, how do we acknowledge this to make sure that when people are on a really steep learning curve in the public sector, You know, how do we appropriately guide people when they're spending our money to do this work? So because we've got to get the balance right here.
Thanks, Karen. So Ross, I'll go to you and then I'll go to Yakuba after that.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess we're in a good spot on this, Karen. I'd probably be optimistic because we haven't fully aligned. We've actually already got the rebuttable presumption that it's a lot more flexible than the private sector on this, for the reasons you've just outlined. So I think that puts us in a good place. The challenge we have here is the challenge is in applying someone else's guidance, not our own. So as a standard setter, we tend to use our standards and our guidance and our standards to tell people how to apply the specifics of the guidance we set. So that sets a bit of a line that we shouldn't be telling people how to interpret the GHG protocol. And maybe that's part of what we need to acknowledge here in the communication. But I do think this is one of the major areas in the feedback statement that we need to make prominent, is that we have provided more flexibility than the private sector, and that and we're trying to engage with the GHG protocol and their active program to update that guidance so that they consider more public sector considerations as they look to finalize their project in the next couple of years to update the protocol. So that's all I wanted to come in and say. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. And I guess I think, that's where in engaging with the GHG protocol staff, I think then to your point, Karen, in terms of no, it wouldn't be appropriate then to include the examples that staff have developed. But I think one of the things would be to examine the potential alongside all the various other changes going on as to whether that would be helpful for some form of education material or something going forwards. And I think that's, as you say, everybody's going to be struggling with this. But I think, and I think you're right, Ross, in terms of feedback statement, maybe we should also just have in finalizing the BCs as well, just to make sure that we've sort of at least, alluded to the points that Karen was raising there. So, obviously we want BCs to be reasonably timeless, but I think as we acknowledge, this is an evolving space. So I've got Yakuba next and then Scott. So Yakuba, to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine is a clarification question. The staff suggested that we bring back the fact we are bringing out of the boundary the public policy program in the GHG emission disclosures. So my question is, as we are drafting a standalone standard, and we already explained that we are splitting the standard, is there any need to continue pushing back on those specific cases? So it is already clear that the standard is dedicated to own operation. Do we need also always to bring back this explanation in the BC? Thank you.
Thanks, Yakuba. Karen or Ross, back on that?
So if I understood you correctly, Yakuba, are you asking whether we need to try? There is some communication in BCs that communicate that we split the standards, but then we don't have anything in the authoritative guidance that suggests that we are scoping anything out, and neither did we have this in mind when we drafted this IG. We explained this from the perspective of what's currently in the standard, so from the reporting boundaries that's provided by scopes 1, 2, and 3. And I think that is something we'll keep in mind to frame the standard from what we currently already have, and not from the perspective of what we are yet to discuss and decide on. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, Karen. Ross, you're okay now? Okay. So if I can go to Scott and then Patricia.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I would want just to respond to Karen's comment. Agree. I think we do need to acknowledge that. But again, I'll come back to where Ross. I think we're in a pretty good space here, and I'll tell you why. I just think that my comments for the benefit of the board more than anything else is all these various standard setters that Ian referred to earlier and Ross did, whether it's a greenhouse gas protocol or the European Union or the IPSASB, are all out here implementing implementation guidance. So everybody's really focused on this. So I don't think as we go forward, we should think we're the only one in this space. There's a lot of other people in this space that are providing an awful lot of guidance in here that we can leverage. So as we knew from one of the advantages of going down this route is we can leverage off what everybody else has done. So I would encourage everybody to kind of keep that in mind. The other element is, which we'll talk about later, is transition effective date. So the more time that we have an effective date, the more we have people to figure all this out and going forward. So my comment is just really for the benefit of the board and the context. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I mean, I think that underlines the fact that, very much in this space, it's going to be about thinking about the educational material and so on, to help our constituents with that, and that will change and evolve. But as you say, I think we shouldn't be shy about if other people have picked this up in their educational material and it looks good from our point of view, or it's a good basis. I think we should be going using that. Patricia, and then Fabienne.
Thank you. I agree not to change the authoritative text, but I think you need to be careful with how to explain EBCs, because I think the affirmation that the 15 scope 3 categories to include emission associate, there is no association of the public policy programs, because the entity that is responsible for public policy programs perform activities. These activities has impact on the scope 3. Maybe I think the way to explain is the scope 3, you reflect the day-to-day activities performed by the entities relate or not with public policy program, but the focus or the focus is on the entity, not in the public policy programs. I agree with the to not include authoritative text, but I think we need to explain better in the BCs. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like a very helpful perspective. Karen, sorry, I spoke over you.
No, Patricia, I think we can work with you on drafting that BCs. We've also received some drafting comments from Andrew as well, so we'll work to try to balance both views.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Fabienne.
Thank you, Ian. I actually wanted to build on Alex Metcalf's written comment that the transition period had been extended from 1 to 3 years, and that sort of aligns with the CAG comments in June, where they discussed the scope 3 emissions, saying that commenting on the fact that scope 3 emissions are important in the public sector, given the broad influence of the public sector, sometimes even more important than scopes 1 and 2. And they also discussed the complexity of scope 3 emissions and measuring scope 3 emissions, and also thought that the extension period would sort of mitigate the complexity. So I just wanted to add that. And I also wanted to point out the point that staff made in its recommendation that public policy programs should be out of the scope 3 emissions. So I think it's a very important point going forward and dealing with public policy programs. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fabienne. And I think if we can just make sure that we've captured fully that CAG advice in the BCs, I think that would be quite helpful, in terms of, that influencing the board's deliberations. Okay, so I think that obviously there are some communication issues there, and I think some helpful steers from members, so staff can work with members just to make sure we've captured those additional bits of thinking in the BCs. That feels like we're in a good place, and I think it was useful to do that additional piece of work just to really show we've worked it through. So I think with that, we round up on that item, and then I think, Alex, we're going to you.
Sorry, I'm talking away, but I'm on mute. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, good. So I said thank you, Chair, was the first thing I'd said. And that brings us through to agenda item 2.2.2, where we have the updated version of the draft standard. And here you'll have also seen the board papers with the full updated standard that this time we didn't include all of the highlights through it, but instead cleaned it up and brought it to you with the changes that have occurred between our September board meeting and today's check-in. So what we'd like to do now is to take you through, grouped by rationale, the changes that now show up in this draft standard. So if we work through with you, instead of as a page flip, a kind of targeted review and discussion around the particular areas of change that have arisen in the last number of weeks, and then look to hear any comments from board members in that process. So let me
Thanks, Alex. And just to comment, I think in the way that the same way that we've done, with natural resources, we'll work through point by point in terms of the staff paper, and then we'll just do that section by section, just walk through again at the end to pick up any additional final comments at that stage. So sorry, Alex, I thought it was just useful to make that point before you start off.
Yeah, good to clarify. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. All right, so then to start us off, then we have the first set of changes within the agenda item, which relate to board instructions from September 2025. So here we have changes that sit within the objective, within definitions and application guidance. So if we look at objective here, these are right at the top with paragraphs 1 and 2. You'll remember this giving us additional alignment into IFRS S2, so we were cleaning up the language there, as well as signposting into Appendix B to help with the materiality definition and helping preparers in that regard. On definitions, there's an additional appendix that's added at this point, which is Appendix D, that then articulates where there are IPSAS standards that are applied, there are IPSAS standard definitions applied with the same meaning within this draft standard. So that's in line with the approach you'll see in RPG 1. And then finally, we have the application guidance here as well, which shows up at AG 3. And this is looking at descriptions around the own operations reporting perspective and trying to delineate here between the own operations and PPP, which is then further explained in the BCs as well. So Ian, I might pause here.
Yeah, okay. So if you can
there,
stop sharing the screen at that point, and we'll just go through each of those points in turn under the table. So if I can take any points on the amendments to the objective. Yeah, Karen.
Thank you. I've already passed the message on to staff in relation to this. When I had raised the point about Appendix B, my intention there was actually it was a bit more than just referring to those materiality paragraphs, because Appendix B needs to be read in conjunction with the standard as it's pervasive. So I've suggested to staff that there's an additional sentence added to the scope to make that clear, and I think staff were happy with that proposal. So I just wanted to flag that.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you,
Karen.
Karen. That was really helpful addition there to direct people, not just related to materiality, but more broadly as well. But it's integral.
So obviously we would need to just see that sentence or whatever marked up in the final version, but I just wanted to check that everybody's content with that. Okay, thanks, Karen. So then we move on to the change on in the scope paragraph. So that's point 2. And then box 3 on changes in definitions. Yeah, Mike.
So thank you, Chair. First, I might admit that really the on the slides, the box on the right-hand side and the low didn't see it to 100% because the screen of Alex was attached to that field on my screen. It wasn't able to remove it. So, but I got it refers to AG3, didn't it?
That's the next one, Mike. So we're
that's the next one. Okay,
the next one's AG3. Sorry, I was
second. Thank you.
Okay. So Mike, you'll wait until the next point, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Patricia, to you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about the definition that was included in the appendix. Because the definition, for example, assets, the definition is not the same of the conceptual framework. What is the criteria to decide what definition you need you be included in the appendix? Only to understand the rationale.
Thanks, Patricia.
Just to understand your question, Patricia, you're asking about the rationale of what was included within Appendix D. Is that right?
So I think Patricia picked up an inconsistency between what's in D and what's in the conceptual framework, and I'm assuming that the principle is that we're picking up what's in the term, whichever term is in the glossary at the moment, but just ask for firstly the principle with staff, and maybe we have just something that we need to check there.
Yeah, this is, I think, a good one for us to look at. And on the principle, yes, it was drawn from the glossary and looking through the document. There is actually maybe a good point. I'm not sure if you're about to come in on this, Ross, but a point that we had from Andrew on this one as well. Is that where you're going to go, Ross?
No, I just first wanted to clarify
Okay.
on this. So just to be clear, there still are inconsistencies between the conceptual framework and each standard in the IPSAS because of the ordering of developing the standards. The framework didn't come into effect until 2014. And at that point, we had, I think, 36 standards in place and a number of definitions. So there are slight inconsistencies between the framework and the standards are the authoritative guidance, not the conceptual framework. The conceptual framework is I call it the Bible for the IPSASB to use in working through new guidance. So in this case, we're following what's in the authoritative text as the authoritative guidance. So there will be some inconsistencies there. That's the principle we operate on. As we update major standards, as we did for revenue, expenses, and recent standards, we do align to the framework more fully, and we go back and fix the guidance. So I just wanted to clarify on that point. And Alex, I'm happy if everyone's content with that explanation to pass over if you want to make the comment from Andrew.
Sorry, just to add, Ross, on that. I mean, obviously, in this case in particular, the definition of asset is actually in IPSAS 1, and the consistency point with the framework will then be picked up through the presentation of financial statements project. So it's probably worthwhile, though, that we do actually just in the BCs actually clarify that that's where this has come from, so that people don't see it as unintentional, that it is actually a timing issue. Patricia, you want to come back on that?
No, I agree with your proposal. Thank you.
Okay, Thanks, Patricia. But good that we picked that one up because it could cause confusion. So Alex, I think we're with you back on the next slide.
Good. Yeah. Well, actually, Ian, just before we move into the next slide, there was this point from Andrew that we received. It is just a couple hours ago that came through via email. So I don't want to misinterpret anything that he's shared here. But he did provide some feedback in relation to Appendix B, yes, Appendix D or Delta, where he's suggesting here instead that some of the terms used here actually it wouldn't be appropriate to bring into the sustainability reporting standard. Or not wouldn't be needed in Appendix D. And after a very quick discussion between Karen and myself, we're actually leaning more towards whether this is an appropriate, whether it's needed to have Appendix D within the standard actually. You can see you kind of putting your head side to side.
I think the trouble is we're going backwards and forwards on this because we
Yes,
agreed
yeah,
that we
yeah.
needed it in September. And I think, at this stage, I'm not minded that, we take it out unless it's doing harm. The board decided it wanted it in September. So I think we should actually not go back round that loop. Ross?
Yeah, I think that's where I was. I think one, unfortunately, Andrew's not here to have the discussion live and the comments were late. So I'm a little bit apprehensive to, go into detail on those because I haven't even seen the comments myself. So I think that this is a discussion we'll have to have with Andrew after the meeting, depending on where the board lands today. And this was one of the explicit changes the board had asked for. So, and I think there's several board members on the call today that were advocating for this. So I don't want to overreact. And I think this is a consistency point that we've added in with what we've done in the RPGs, for example, where they're referring to authoritative definitions in the core IPSAS, which is a different set of standards. So this is consistent with our approach, and I do think it is helpful, and the board has advocated for this. So, we do have to make a decision whether it's in or out, but I think we need to have that decision today.
Thanks. So I think, the point that's being made is this is a standalone standard. It's a new series of guidance. So for the same reason that we had we added the definitions in the RPGs, we should have that. So unless there is a specific definition that, it's understood that we don't need, I think we carry on with the approach that was agreed in September. We're not going to make a change at this stage unless there is a fatal flaw. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, I wasn't part of the conversation in September, but from just this discussion, I support your proposal. And I guess my question to the staff would be, do you see any risk or downside? So I'm more about if it does no harm, it could be helpful. I think we need to acknowledge there are changing standards and the timing with the conceptual framework. But Alex and Karen, is there any risk or concern that you have now, anything that you need to tell us? Because I'm in that kind of, if it does no harm, it's okay.
Thanks, Angela.
So I don't think, thank you, Angela. I don't see this as doing particular harm from what I've seen. I think if, there is the board decision from September, then that's okay. We also did just get the comments from Andrew 120 minutes ago. So I think we just need a little more time to reflect on what might be in there, but I'm in the same place, Angela, of what we've heard here.
Ross.
Yeah, just maybe, again, I haven't looked at all the comments in detail, so maybe there is a fatal flaw we've missed. If there is, then we'll have to revisit. But I mean, maybe the context of why to include it is because we're trying to emphasize the connectivity with the financial reporting of these types of items. So I think it's helpful to users to highlight the definitions from the financial reporting standards that I would, in a perfect world, be expecting an entity to be applying and accounting for the financial impact of the non-financial information we're talking about here. So from a consistency perspective, I think it should be helpful that you're thinking about our definitions of assets and IPSAS when you're thinking about reporting climate risks and disclosures and non-financial information in the standard we're advocating for. So I'm struggling to understand why to take it out, or the proposal from Andrew at this point, with the context of the discussions we've had to date, and for the reasons we put them in the RPGs originally, because it's the same issue with RPGs, where you're reporting other information like service performance information or long-term fiscal sustainability. It's helpful to have those financial reporting definitions as you think about the non-financial information. Thanks.
So I think, I'm not going to take any further comments on this. I think, the principle is the board agreed it wanted these in September. We have staff have actioned the response from the board. If there is some additional, rubric or explanation at the start, just to explain, then that's fine. We can include that. Equally, if there is any fatal flaw, or if there's any risk introduced with any of the definitions, then we can examine that. We will explain in the basis for conclusions that there is an inconsistency within our literature. But I think all of this does underline the point about connectivity with the financial statements, and that is really important. So with that, I am not proposing that we have any further discussion on this today, and I would like to move us on to the next point. If we can do that, please.
There you are. Thank you very much, Chair. So we did cover off then definitions here. The one where Mike was looking to come in was in relation to application guidance, which is the final row, before we move on to the next slide.
Okay, so Mike, to you.
So thank you, Chair. And just that relates to discussion we had in Lisbon. I was quite satisfied. I fully understand that we don't want to define public policy programs at the moment, because it is part of the later project that this point is taken. So don't worry about that. But nevertheless, I think BC 11, that is a quite important part of the standard, because that is a text which really clearly shows you what is in scope and what is out scope, that unique role of the public sector. But I think AG3 at a point where is it located, that's quite good. So no doubt about that. But I think content-wise, I'm really struggling with AG3, and I'm struggling with AG3 because AG3 refers here now to the operational model, unfortunately not using own operations anymore. And if you look in the definition of operational model, that's quite broad, because it generally refers to outcomes and so on. And so I think a reader, a stakeholder, which is not familiar with our discussions, really doesn't understand that we, let's say, in fact, scope out a certain part of that unique public entities role. And therefore, I would be quite in favor to redraft AG3 in a more clearer way, let's say, without, let's say, mentioning public policy programs, but maybe with day-to-day work or outcomes of regulatory role of public bodies. But here I think it's confusing. And it's also confusing because in AG1 we are mentioning public policy, advice, design, implementation, and then 2 paragraphs later we have that AG3. So yeah, I would vote for a clear redraft of AG3. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Clearly there is a tension here in terms of where we are and the work that we've got coming up. Ross, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think at this point, we've already got quite a bit on scope, and it doesn't really add anything other than saying, we think all public sector entities might apply that, but do we need to be that prescriptive? Why don't we just take it out and rely on the paragraphs we already have if it's causing problems?
Sorry, Ross, I haven't got the document open at the moment. So what are you proposing?
I'll read AG3 that Mike was just referring to. I'm just getting back to my page here, but I just did a flip back and forth between the scope paragraphs and this. All it says is this draft standard is expected to be relevant to all public sector entities. And applying this draft standard, an entity shall include all activities in its operational model. We already have all that described up front. It's not adding much new or context. So I think we could just take it out if it's causing problems with Mike. I don't think it's doing much.
Mike, can I go back to you on that proposal?
Yeah, thank you. But definitely not in favor of taking out the AG3, because I think it was a result of the discussion in Lisbon, where it said, okay, what we have in the BC, what is now BC 11, that's quite very important to understand how far our first sustainability reporting standard goes and what it covers. Therefore, it's good to have something like AG3, but please in a more clearer wording, because the wording it is here, it doesn't deliver anything new. They're right, Ross. But I think it's really worth to consider to have in AG3 something which really says that day-to-day operations, that they're really the core of our standard, and that regulatory role is outside. Maybe that is the same what is in BC 11, but I think BC 11 is something which is not really basis for conclusion. It's more type of, let's say, a text of a standard.
Claudia, are you in on this then? No, you're not.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm in it. I'm sorry. I'm
okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, go for it.
At first, I really agree on this proposal from Ross to delete the first sentence. This standard is expected to be relevant for all public sector entities. That's kind of a BC or whatever. It's or an ed, and have nothing to do in an authoritative text of an application guidance. And the second sentence, as Mike already explained, yeah, it would be good to be a little bit more precise what an operational model means. Maybe we have something in our AG on a different position about what is the operational model, that it's the linkage really clear, that the operational model is what they're doing, they're working on their computers, but not the grounds they're giving on whatever that's following up on the grounds. So I really agree on what Mike said. If he could be one or two more precise what it means in this context, would be helpful.
Okay. So I think the proposition is that we delete the first sentence, but that we need some additional explanation and recognizing the fact that we cannot mention public policy programs, but there's probably actually just a little bit more text that could be used around that to get at the point that Mike is making. So I think, the proposition then is that we go back and just have a little bit, see if we can be a little bit more forthcoming without digging any holes. Because I think if we get longer than about 2 or 3 sentences, then there is too much there. So that, I think, is the proposition on that one. Ross?
Sorry, I'm kind of frozen right now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ross.
So the only point I wanted to play in is we do have a definition of operating model. If we want to put that in, we could just repeat the definition in the AG.
That may well be quite a good way of doing it because it puts it in the right place. So I think clearly there is a point here that needs to be responded to, and I think we'll respond to it along those lines. So I'm not looking for any additional comments either in support or if we're okay on that, that would be the proposal that we elaborate on AG3, but probably the first sentence needs to come out. And we'll ask staff to work with those members that are interested just in getting that drafting right. Mary.
Yes, thank you. And I'm concerned about the definition of the operational model, and I'm very greatly thanks to add the BC 35. However, it is necessary to how the operational model is related to the own operation and how it relates to the public policy program, and it is necessary from my point of view. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So I think we are prisoners of the fact that we cannot define own operations and public policy programs in the standard. I think there may be something we can do further in the basis for conclusions to explain why we've used the revised terminology. And I think that's probably a question for staff back, have a reflect on the action point for AG3, and alongside that, then to just make sure we've been as clear as we can in the BCs to address the concern that Mary has expressed there. This is a tricky balance, and I suspect we're not going to be able to do everything, but I think perhaps a little bit more will help along those lines. Just to check, Alex, that's clear in terms of what the board's looking for there.
That's fine. I think so. What I understand, Mary, is you're looking for maybe a bit of additional review around BC 35, where we talk about business model used in IFRS S2, public sector context, then requiring operational model in the definition that we have up front in relation to that. So is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Good. Right, thank you.
Thanks. And if you can double check that with Mary, that does the job.
Yes. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay, so back into the slide then, Alex.
Yep. Just get that for everyone. Good. So that brings us on then to the next set of instructions. All of this then relating to basis for conclusions. And actually, Chair, some of these we've been talking about already now. So BC 35, we were just hearing from Mary on that, as well as BC 11 from Mike. So each of these then kind of relating as the explanations to the changes that we've seen up front in the standard. I don't know if there's any additional comments across the BC references then.
Sorry, Alex, I'm just struggling to link the slides in with the paper at the moment. I'm wondering whether it may be just easier to do what we did with the natural resources and literally just not use the slides, but just go point by point through item 2.2.
Okay, I can switch it over if you'd like. Yeah,
so I think that's probably clearer, actually.
Instead of by rationale, we're going to go to just follow the order that we have in there.
So it'll be item 5 on the table then.
Yeah, okay. So if you just want to do what Edwin did, which is just comment on anything additional in the table, and then I'll take comments on box 5, item 5.
Sure. So I'm struggling to get to I think I have the wrong things open with the other one still. So
do
you have it open already, Karen, or no?
Yeah, it would be item 5, BC on proportionality. So that's to explain that the IPSASB's intention is to encourage different entities with limited capacity also to make those disclosures rather than to make it easier for entities to comply to make those disclosure requirements. So it's not to encourage inconsistent application of the standard.
Right, Karen.
Sorry, I'm a bit lost. Could you just confirm exactly which paper we're in and which box you're referring to, because my box 5 doesn't have that in it. So I'm obviously looking at the wrong box 5. That would be helpful. Thanks.
So agenda item 2.2.2, the table following paragraph 8. So page 2 of agenda 2.2.2.
Okay, but my box 5 has got paragraph 26F in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what confused me too. It's the same. So I think, as I understand it, then we were referencing the basis for conclusions, which are closer to the end. I think the challenge for us, Chair, now is that we've kind of started in one route, if you'd like, of the structure. We might have to jump around a little bit if that's okay, if we're going to now follow the table. But how about if I bring the table up for you, and then we can make our way through that? Does that sound okay? Switching approach to, if we covered objective, scope, definitions, and that would then take us to Cortex strategy.
So we're on Cortex metrics and targets. Yeah.
No, I think it'd be number 4.
Sorry, we
Cortex strategy, page 16, paragraph 16. Is that clear, Chair? If we're doing Cortex strategy here with item number 4? Yeah. Good. Okay. So this is a particular change that came from additional alignment.
So I think if we're relocated in the document, I don't think you need to share that because members have got that. But I think the confusion was that the slides weren't syncing in with the boxes, and that was why I said let's just go to the approach that Edwin was using with natural resources. So we literally go box by box. So if we just go back a step to box 4, which I'm not sure that we'd actually covered, which is Cortex strategy, and then literally just work through logically box by box. I think that's probably easiest for members. Certainly that, I think that was Karen and I probably had the same confusion. If that's okay with you, Karen and Alex.
Yeah. So that does bring us to then number 4, Cortex strategy, where this is a change resulting from additional IFRS S2 alignment, where we're suggesting to remove paragraph 16. That was not included within IFRS S2.
Okay. So having relocated us in that box, any comments on that? Okay, so box 5 now.
Good.
Cortex.
So yeah, this is Cortex metrics and targets, looking at internal carbon price. So you'll find that at paragraph 26F. And this is, again, then a change resulting from increased alignment with IFRS S2, where we're bringing the examples back.
Okay. Not seeing any hands raised on that. So let's move on to box 6.
Good. And then box 6 is in relation to peer metrics, paragraphs 29 and 34. And this is one that was to work towards increasing some consistency within the draft standard. There were a couple of changes that resulted from this, including removing other metrics. That's something that was actually related to public policy programs.
Okay, not seeing any hands raised, so I think we're fine with those changes.
Then 7 we've addressed because that's the AG3 discussion that we've covered already. So that'll bring us to box 8, application guidance, metrics and targets at AG90. So here we have the decision to split into 2 separate standards, meaning that we need to remove other metrics, which shouldn't have been referenced there. And then we have an alignment with metric categories as well.
Okay, so any comments on 8? No, I think that's fine. So move us on then to 9.
This is basis for conclusions on proportionality, adding in a BC. relating to the proportionality mechanisms, providing clarity there.
Any comments on that? No, I think we're good with that.
Good. Okay. Basis for conclusions background. This is number 10, BC 11 and 21. So we've talked about this a bit already on BC 11, but we also have in BC 21 rationale around some of the changes with further alignment in the private sector guidance.
Okay, I think we're fine with that.
Okay, then we have basis for conclusions definitions. So I think probably, Chair, we've covered that with BC 35 and we have some instructions on that one.
Yeah, Karen, you wanted to come in?
Sorry, I was a bit late on BC 2021. It's kind of related to that, but it's to do with the alignment between S1 and S2 and whether we can now say that we are aligned or fully aligned, and if there are places where we're not, because I think there are still a couple of places where we're not aligned. I think I referred to sort of undue cost or effort earlier, and I think that is in S2, but it's not in here. So as well as sort of talking about pushing to alignment, I think if we haven't aligned on something, and I don't think there's many places, but I've noted a couple of places. I should say I think Henning very kindly noted a couple of places where we are not aligned. And so if we have deliberately decided to do that, we should identify that and be clear why we've taken that approach, because I don't think that is exposed at the moment where we have taken that approach.
Thanks, Karen. I think that would be a very, important piece of clarity. So if we can action that, thanks.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
And then we're back on 11. Any comments on there? Paragraph BC 35, acknowledging the point that's already been made. Yeah, Claudia.
Thank you very much. We have added in the illustrated guidance 1 a reference to capital deployment. There are 2 examples for example metrics. The first one, percentage of annual capital expenditure, that seems even in the public sector worth, but I really struggle with the second proposal, percentage of climate-related investment deployed through partnership or grants. Grants is at first, I think, on public-private programs, public policy programs, where we're giving grants to someone that they change their behavior for emissions. And it could be as a confusing example. And if it's only examples, if it's don't harm, I would delete the second example.
Thanks, Claudia. You'd actually moved on to 12, but just to check nobody else had any comments on 11, and then move on to 12, and then Alex, over to you on that one.
So I'd be comfortable that we'd keep just the first example as alignment instead, is what I've heard from you there, Claudia. So percentage of annual capital expenditure that's going to be allocated to climate adaptation, and that we don't have the second on investment deployed via grants.
Sorry, Alex, you were quiet then. So you want we just remove the second example?
That's what I heard from Claudia. I'd be comfortable that we just remove the second example, align on the first.
Yeah, agreed. I think nods on that. So that will remove that potential confusion. Okay.
Good.
So that takes us through to the end of paper 2.2.2.
Yes.
So at that stage, I think we go back to the beginning of the document, Ross, and if you can do the same process as we did with natural resources, so we can pick up any remaining comments from members.
Yes, happy to do that. I just need a minute because my computer crashed in the middle of that session. I have to reopen the document. So apologies, I missed a couple of minutes of that discussion. All right, so we're going to agenda item 2.3.1. And we're only going to touch on a section by section review, so we'll move relatively quick. But we'll start on page 5 of the document with objective. Then we'll move to scope and definitions that are all on page 5. And then definitions runs through to page 8, where the section on governance and strategy start, page 8 and 9. And then strategy runs through until risk management at the top of page 14.
Yep, Karen.
Thank you. At the bottom of page 9 on climate related risks and opportunities, sorry, I'm actually on the next page on 10. We've deleted what was paragraph 13, and I see that that has moved into the AG, which is the right direction for me. I guess my question is, do we need to even more around this? And maybe it's something you're thinking about for education materials, but certainly my experience in terms of thinking this through for the UK public sector is this is really hard, and the time horizons and the approach to it are very different to the private sector. 10 years in the private sector is a long time. 10 years in the public sector is a blink of the eye. So thinking about those time horizons is quite different, and I think we need to give people not authoritative guidance, but we need to provide, I think, additional guidance to help think about what might be appropriate. And I don't know whether you're thinking about that for education materials, but as I say, just drawing on the experience of the UK, where this went round and round a bit in terms of, well, what actually is useful in this regard. We might need to give people a bit more of a helping hand to think through the issues. So I don't have a problem with it not being in core guidance. I think AG is the direction of travel. I think my question is there more in terms of non-authoritative guidance that we could do? And if we think that's appropriate, where might that appear? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Ross, if you want to come back on that.
Yeah, I think we can add this to the list of items to consider further for, education material and other implementation support. I don't think we can do more in this document at this time, because I just don't think we have enough information on the matters you're talking about in terms of practice. So as far as I know, there are probably only 2 countries that have really started thinking about this. And from my understanding, I don't think they've even developed national guidance on this yet. So we might be able to continue to watch the development of this as the standard rolls out, but I'm not sure what specific guidance we can add above what's there in the principles now that's actually going to help people with the issue.
Thanks, Ross. So I think that is the way forward. I think we should actually have a running list of areas where we think additional educational material will be required. And so I think that if we can put that on the list, then for that process. Okay. So Ross, back to you.
Thank you. So I think, again, that section we were looking at runs through to risk management at the top of page 14. And at the bottom of that page, metrics and targets starts on page 14.
Yeah, Karen.
So just following up on my earlier point, I think this is an area where we think there's a slight difference in G2 in terms of amount of remuneration, which I think compares to S2 that says percentage. So, I think this is one where it will be useful to understand, if I've picked it up correctly, why we've gone for a slightly different approach.
Okay. So if we have that as an instruction to staff, just to double check that on that, and then explain as necessary. Okay, Ross, back to you.
Yep. So back into metrics and targets. Runs through page 17 and 18 through to effective date and transition, halfway through page 18. And that brings us to the end of the core guidance. And the application guidance starting on page 19. And we start with scope and definitions.
Yeah, Karen.
So just a really quick point on this, and kind of recognizing the learning curve for people picking up this guidance. I did wonder whether we might insert the word material on occasion. So for example, in AG4, the second sentence talks about disclosures about climate related risks. I wondered whether it would be helpful for people to remind them that we're talking about disclosures about material climate related risks. I know that we might not ordinarily do that, and I don't think it's needed in every case, but I just wondered whether that could be beneficial to those who are using the application guidance. So I just wanted to register that thought.
Ross.
I think we need to be careful here because every time we make those slight changes, it kind of goes to an earlier point you made, Karen, about if we're intending to be different from the private sector guidance we're leveraging and our other guidance. So we don't normally add material throughout. There's a general understanding in IPSAS that you only have to provide material accounting information and disclosures for all of our guidance. If it's immaterial, you can ignore it. That's a general IPSAS understanding that is across our standard. So if we start inserting material, that might signify to some users of the standard that we mean something different than what we normally mean, and that can be quite confusing. So I would not want to go forward with starting to arbitrarily, or even if we think it's there, because then it's like there's different shades of material information, and I don't think that's actually helpful. So interested in views on that.
Karen, back on that. I mean, I do wonder whether we just have a look at what we say on this in the basis for conclusions, because of course that's and that may be an opportunity just to underline that principle operates throughout. But I think you're right to point out the risks there, Ross. Karen.
I was going to make a similar point. I was in two minds in terms of raising this because I completely get what you said, Ross. But maybe the BCs is a place, but maybe even at the head of the application guidance, is to again remind people, because I think the point here for me is that people who use IPSAS are familiar with this concept, but we might have people using this standard who aren't familiar with using either this standard or an accounting standard. So maybe we don't have to flip it all the way through, but maybe we just need to remind people when they're looking at applying this that we are focusing on the material.
So I think, I don't want to prolong the debate on this because I want to keep us moving forward, but I think we should just examine how we've dealt with this issue in the BCs, because I think we've also highlighted to people the points from S1, and we brought in the concept of materiality there, and that now is flagged very clearly up front. So I think, let's reflect on the discussion in the BCs just to underline that point. But I think we've probably gone as far as we can, I think that's all we can do at this point in time, because we really don't want to introduce, these kind of little niggles that is it really meant to be a change from S2 or not? Karen, final comment, and then I want to move back into the page flip.
Yeah, on that, and on Karen's points, we do already have material information in paragraph 2 of the standard, so that's already in the objective of the standard. And I think in as staff in talking to different entities who are looking to apply the standard materiality is very much at the top of their mind when looking at this.
Okay, thanks, Karen L, for the response, Karen S. So Ross, back to you in terms of the section by section.
Yeah, so that moves us through page 19 into page 20, page 21, page 22, page 23, page 24, page 25. At the bottom of page 26, we've got risk management metrics and targets through 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. And then as we get into climate related targets at the bottom of page 34, and that takes us through to the end of the AGs on page 35 and Appendix B starting on page 36, general requirements for climate related disclosures. That runs through 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, through 42 to Appendix B.AG, application guidance starting on page 43, 44, 45, 46.
Yeah, Karen.
Thank you. On BAG 24, I know this is a conversation that has come up previously, but I just want to log it. Don't expect to have a discussion about it, which is about the scope of this in terms of primary users, because I'm still just a bit concerned that there are some people applying this who might think that lobby groups are a primary user of this, because they are taxpayers or they represent a part of society or whatever it is. And I don't think we're intending it for those groups of people. I don't know how we deal with it, but that is on my worry list. And so I just wanted to put that back out there again as something that, that those applying it might find difficult to handle. So I just wanted to log that point.
Can I just check back? I'm assuming that this ties in with the conceptual framework in terms of what we've got on users. Yeah. So I think,
yeah,
and that's why I'm just logging it, because I'm not saying that it's inconsistent. I'm just worried about how it will get applied. In practice, again, if there are people that are not familiar with financial statement presentation, then it might be difficult. I'm not expecting an answer. I just want to flag. I'm not, and I know that it's consistent, but I'm just flagging that I think this might be a difficulty. And again, it may be something for education.
I mean, I think, this comes into the category of all the way through this project, we've acknowledged that this is a learning experience for everybody. And I think, if this begins to emerge as a problem in practice, at that stage, we will need to see what's happening and how it gets addressed. Ross?
Yeah, just a quick point back. I think appreciate the concern, Karen, and I think implementation will be a challenge, which is one of the reasons we've provided support with the implementation forum. And I think maybe we continue to emphasize that to people as it rolls out. But again, I think from a perspective of the board's job here, it's about the clarity of the principles. And then it is kind of on the users of the standards to start to work through how to apply those in practice. And we take a principled open approach so that the users of the standards can make their own judgments and we don't prescribe or set who may or may not apply, because in some jurisdictions, when they're thinking about their primary users, it might be those groups that you would think from your experience wouldn't be in. But so that's why we rely on the principles from the framework. We try and bring those in, and then we leave it to judgment of the preparers to make their own judgment. So, yeah, we'll have to see how it rolls out, as Ian said.
Okay, thanks. I recognise the concerns. Okay, Ross, so take us back into the page flip.
Thanks. So that brings us to the bottom of page 46, 47, into 48, 49. The bottom of 49, we have reporting entity. And then we move into page 50 where we have connected information, through to page 51 where we have general requirements.
Yeah, Karen?
Just a quick question. On BAG 56, should IPSASB be in the list? So I leave that with staff to consider, but we referenced them earlier and they weren't on the list, so I wasn't sure whether they should be there or not.
We'll take that one away because now that IPSASB is technically part of the IFRS Foundation, we have to just check the status of them as a standard setter and how they fit. And we'll look at how they name now in their guidance. I think it probably already falls under IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards because it's the industry guidance that sits below the ISSB standards.
Yeah. But then I think Karen's point is then we just need to be consistent with the earlier reference, isn't it? So if staff can take that away and check both references, that would be great. Thanks, Karen. Ross, back to you.
Yeah, that brings us through 51, 52, 53, and the end of Appendix BAG and into Appendix C, QCs. And very little changed here since September, so I'm gonna maybe just ask if there's any comments at all on this appendix. And then that takes us to Appendix D, the terms from other IPSAs. And I know we have the comments from Andrew and Elizna, and we'll make sure to connect with them after to understand better what they're looking for, but I'll ask for comments from any other members on this appendix. That takes us to page 62 on basis for conclusions. 62, 63 brings us to the bottom of 63 where we have some background BCs, which take us through 65, 66, top of 67 where objective and scope starts. 68, definitions. 69, strategy. 70, risk management and metrics and targets. Through to 71, 72, 73, where peer metrics starts at the bottom of the page. Page 74, where effective date begins. 75, conceptual foundations. Through 76, 77, bottom of 77, general requirements. 78, 79, implementation guidance and illustrative examples. That brings us to the end of the VCs. The top of page 80, we have implementation guidance. Brings us through to implementation guidance, transition and primary users on 81. Publicly available information on 82. Green financing instruments on 82. And 83 brings us to the end of the IGs. Illustrative example starts the top of page 84, runs through 85, 86, 87, 88, end of IEs. Then we have the comparison table at the end of the standard, and that's the end of the section by section review.
Okay. Thanks, Ross. And thank you very much to Alex for the work they put in since September. There's been a lot to process here, and I think, there are still some specific comments that, we need to process from members as a result of today's discussion, but they are very targeted. So thank you both for doing an excellent job in synthesizing all those changes. I think that was really helpful. So again, just to underline then, we will just see those final changes, and then we will move into the approval process. I don't know if there's any comments from staff just on what members should expect in December. Ross or Karen?
Yeah. Well, Karen, I think you said this at the top as well, right? So we're looking to bring a feedback statement as well as planning to move towards a vote on final pronouncement as the intention for December in New York.
And we'll be talking about the effective date as well. We'll bring back a draft feedback statement for the board to review.
Great. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question with this standard, and I actually referencing Scott's comment in the comment box around leveraging education material. I think this is a very unusual standard from our usual financial, where actually the expectation is a huge amount of education material will either be cross-referenced or linked to somebody else's, or I guess the comms around what's going to sit around the standard. And so I think just from a communications and a strategic point of view, we're putting out the standard and we'll have our feedback statement. It sounds very business as usual, but I feel this is not a business as usual standard that we're putting out. And I just wondered at what point as board members will we understand what sort of supporting material will either go around it when it's issued or expected to be developed over time. It's probably not one you could answer now, but I'm always conscious as soon as it's going to market, it seems like every other jurisdiction, every other standard setter has quite a significant plan on how to support implementation education.
Thanks, Angela. Ross, to you on that.
Yeah, thanks, Angela, and I completely agree, and good suggestions as well to make sure the communication comes together, and we can summarize that everything we've done, because I do think there's quite a bit happening in various ways since we've been doing this work, and I think it is a landmark time to approve this first sustainability reporting standard, which is a whole new set of standards for IPSASB. So I think we do need to capture this at a high level, the communication plan and the additional processes and resources we've put in place, like the Sustainability Implementation Forum, like the SRG, and the continuing work on implementation and non-authoritative guidance education material that will be. Part of what we'll do is we'll update our sustainability website to start to put links to that material. We've been doing that all along the project, but we probably need a good deep dive into everything that's out there, as it's a shifting landscape all the time as other standards setters put out guidance. So I do think we need a little bit more in the feedback statement to call that out, so that when people read through the history of the project and where the board's landed, they clearly see that the standard going out the door isn't the end of the work. Work will continue on an ongoing basis. We might not have all the elements of the plan on day one when it goes out, but we should highlight the board's intention since the beginning that this standard setting this space would be more iterative, and we'd need to do more to support going out. And I also think we should highlight that we won't be providing all the answers. We have limited standard setting staff, and others will have to help fill the gap. But our job is getting that standard out the door so people can really start that implementation phase. And we can reference organizations we're already working with, such as World Bank, such as Asian Development Bank, and many of these institutions, IFAC, for example, that will need to work globally to support the rollout of the new standard. So happy to work with staff on that, and the board can see the first ideas on this in December. And then we'll continue to discuss and take that forward as the implementation of the standard starts to come through in 2026.
Thanks, Ross. I think that update in December will be very helpful, and probably that's something that not I will be around for then, but that will be quite helpful to keep in view, on a quarterly basis, maybe through your report, in terms of what's going on. Scott.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. Ian, thank you. I was one of several people in Lisbon that stayed around for the task force, and we agreed to look at that education document. That's why I mentioned it in there, Angela. And I did a deep dive, more time than I wanted to spend on that document. And I can tell you that I was surprised at how aligned it is. Okay, I don't think it's going to be a heavy lift on that document. I was very pleased about how I think we're going to be able to easily leverage that. We got to, public sector size it, but I was very pleased about, I think that document worked very well for us. So if that makes you feel any better.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah. Okay, good. So thank you very much, everybody. I think as evidenced by the comments, a lot of detailed review by members and TAs on that document, and that's really important. So thank you very much, everyone, in addition to the work that staff have done. We will see those very final amendments, and then we'll move into approval in December. So with that, from one new area for the board we move then into the IPSAS GFS project, which is another area that is unfamiliar for many board members. Clearly, it's going to be very important in terms of the positioning of this material and the explanation of what we are trying to do with this. And that was why we thought, João and the task force have been sort of talking about this. It was useful to give you an update on where we'd got to on the communication side of this for this meeting. Really to try and it's evolving, so to try and get your input into that, and is it moving in the right direction? What additional things need to be put into that? So without further ado, I will pass over to João.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So following what Ian was saying, after the very good feedback that staff received from the board at the September meeting, staff of the task force had a meeting on October 6th to discuss that good feedback. And we basically categorized into types of feedback that we received, which is in the project agenda item. I'm going to, before passing the slides, I'm just going to do this brief presentation. And the two areas were about project communication, so meaning how the board staff can communicate the objectives and intentions of this project to our constituents that will use the proposed guidance. And a separate category of issues was about the navigation of the three parts of the guidance that we are developing. As you remember, we have three parts. One is about the exposure draft. The second is the comparison with GFSM 2014 tables that we are going to put at the end of each standard. And the third is the alignment dashboard. So staff took back those suggestions. We even engaged with some board members ahead of this meeting, whether through a virtual meeting or whether through email. And staff thanks those board members that we engaged with, and we also received good feedback, and we incorporated that feedback in the proposals that we will discuss shortly. And we also received some late comments, actually a few hours ago, and yesterday evening. Staff has had the opportunity to go through them. Just to acknowledge that it was comments from Angela, Andrew, and Elisna. So stay tuned. Staff will engage with you after this meeting once we go through those suggestions. And just also to know that this is an ongoing process. So at the September meeting, staff brought the first sketch of the exposure draft of that, but at that time it was still in a very rough situation because even the task force work was not yet complete, and it's now more matured, and we intend to finish that work throughout this quarter. And for that, we have already one last task force meeting booked for November 6th, where we plan to close this. But for this meeting, what we wanted to get from the board was to focus the board's attention on the actions that staff and task force action and focusing on the exposure draft itself. And for that, we are planning at the end of the discussion to go with a page flip of those initial pages to see if we got the message right and received some suggestions. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so the slide basically summarizes what it is in the agenda item 3.2.1. Basically, the two categories that I earlier alluded to, the enhancements to project communication and the enhancements to the guidance navigation. I just wanted to highlight one thing that we are proposing some cross-references between these three parts, and that basically is shown in the not only in the ED, but also in the comparison with GFSM tables and also in the alignment dashboard. So regarding the enhancement to project communication, we do have now kind of a project history right up front. We'll discuss later any further suggestions. And now we also have a relationship between IPSAS 22 objective and the proposed non-authoritative guidance. We also added a BC also there. And we have also a focus on the IPSAS standards-based accounting data needs, because at the September meeting, there was some confusion whether we wanted to align our standards with the GFSM or whether it was about the accounting data available in the accounting systems of entities that can be used for statistical compilation. And now we have focused the drafting, the content across the three parts, that it is about the accounting data that we are trying to convey that can be used and not aligning exactly the standards that we have. And regarding the guidance navigation, so to highlight that we have now the last bullet that we have now cross-referenced in the comparison with GFS tables. We'll have a cross-reference in those tables to the proposed guidance in IPSAS 22. And to highlight that those comparisons with GFS tables will be supporting material, so it's not part of the standards. So we have, but it will be part of the material that we'll publish at the December, that we'll publish together with the ED. So with this, staff asks the board comments on the strength project communication, guidance navigation, enhancements to ED 94. And for that, we are planning, with the support of Ross, to have a page flip until page 9 with by these three sections. And before finalizing, the structure of the comments that the comments of the questions and the answers that it is in the remaining of the ED is still under work, so that's why we are not yet bringing it now. But the structure of the questions is more finalized. But given that there was a big reshuffle on those content questions and the answers, that's why we prefer to bring in a clean version of the ED for you, for the board to see more clearly how the guidance will look like when we intend to publish. And with this, I'll pass over to Ian.
So I think in the time available, I would suggest that actually, Ross, if you can just walk us through page by page again, and we'll just start to take comments, because I think they're most constructive if we do it related to the material. Okay?
Yeah,
So if you can stop sharing the screen, Joao, and then we'll start collecting comments as we go through.
Thanks, Ian. And I think we'll start a little earlier in the document. So I will start on the request for information page, which is page 3. And that's because of some of the project history and background that, based on feedback from the board in September, has now been added in the request for comment section, so that in the context of the work and the project is clear upfront before getting into the details. And this was a specific request from the board. That starts on page 3 and runs into page 4. So just pause there to see if there's comments.
Yeah, Angela.
Thank you, Chair. And just that quick comment that I sent to Zhao a few hours before the meeting. It was just a suggestion in terms of that comms. We talk about the importance of adding non-authoritative guidance. And I'm always very conscious. It's quite we use it in a very specific way. And I just wondered whether there should be a footnote or something in the comms. What do we mean by non-authoritative? And I take it to mean it's not mandatory, it's not part of the authoritative text. It's really just helpful material, and it can be in various forms like examples, and in this case Q&A. There's something around it sounds like a very technical term, and I think certainly in the financial reporting space, to be honest, most constituents just say anything that IPSASB says in the document, we'll look to it if we want to make an argument or a point in an accounting policy sense. So I just thought it might be helpful, given a big part of this ED is about communication and what we are doing and what we're not doing. So it was just a little suggestion. I didn't know if we've actually got this defined in our literature anywhere, given that we use it a lot. But I think it was actually quite helpful for broader than this project, actually, just this sort of education around what do we mean by non-integral or non-authoritative.
Thanks, Angela. Ross, to you.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. I think it's a good point. We do actually, we're clear in every standard what's authoritative and not authoritative, and we describe it positively, not negatively. So we don't say what the non-authoritative is, but what we say is the authoritative guidance is the authoritative guidance to apply, and the non-authoritative guidance accompanies, provides context, but it's not part of. So we could provide a little bit of a short description on that in a footnote. I do think it's important that we don't start to overboil it a bit, if you know what I mean. I think we should just stick to what we say, because it is clear in each standard, if you go through the various sections, on the parts that are authoritative and those that aren't, and that those that aren't are an accompaniment to the authoritative guidance. So I think we can take that forward. I think it is helpful, as you said. And again, I think the important part here is this is a little bit different than a normal set of guidance we're bringing in, because we're actually targeting the statisticians, I would say, more than the accountants, so that they're understanding that this deed is available, and if they work with their accounting colleagues, they have good information that they can use for statistical purposes when accrual is being applied. So I think that's another line. So being clear that what we're talking about here versus what we're not would be helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. And I think the other thing we might just remind constituents is, of course, IPSAS 22 has a somewhat unique status in being non-mandatory. So that kind of fits, I think, as well. But probably an additional sentence or something in that intro, perhaps with a bit of a footnote, will help on that. So thanks, Angela, for that point. So, Ross, not seeing any other hands raised on that. So perhaps if we just move a bit further in.
Sure. So that brings us down to page 6 and the introduction and non-authoritative guidance. And I'll highlight paragraph 4, where we put the standards and the groupings we've just used in IPSAS 33. That brings us through page 7, where we get into the various amendments in the BCs at the top of page 8.
Yep, Karen, and then Patricia.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you to Zhao for the work that you've done since we last saw the paper. I feel that there's a better structure to it now, particularly as someone who raised concerns about the difference between presentation and recognition and measurement. I think it's better structured to address that now. On BC 18, and actually I'm just reflecting on what Ross just said, where actually you said, well, this information is for the statisticians, but that's not how BC 18 reads. It reads it's for the accountants. So I think there is a little bit about what kind of who is it for and what is it for. But I think there may be perhaps an oversimplification in this that we really need to recognize, is that whilst the underlying data might be the same and we want the data to be same, the methodologies are different, and it's those methodologies that can lead to the presentational differences. So you can start with the same information, but it can be look very different once we've applied accounting policies to it and statisticians have applied their techniques to it. So I think there just needs to be a bit more recognition of that. And I think we kind of do need to go back to who is this for? Because I know we discussed last time, where does this sit? And I think 22 makes sense, but I think that rationale probably just needs to be tightened a bit in terms of where we're going with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Patricia?
Yeah, thank you. It's about the BC 19. BC 19 does not reflect the questions that the implementation guidance provides answers. But I think it's only to link better that these points, A, B, C, was discussed before start to elaborate the implementation guidance. I think it's not, because when I read the introduction and then I know about the type of questions, the items A, B, C does not reflect the content of the questions and answers. This is my comment about this.
Just to elaborate a bit on that, Patricia. So, if you like, I think there is a disjoint now because the staff have refined the questions, and this came out of the project brief. So obviously there is a need to sort of tie that together a bit more. So I think that can be done. Ross?
Yes, or maybe to indicate that during the project brief, the question was this, but now you refine the questions. You need to indicate that there is no, because BC 19 does not reflect the questions now. Maybe to tell more about the history about the project in each phase.
Okay, Ross, on that?
Yeah, I think I see your point, Patricia. I think what you're saying is BC 19, read out of context, doesn't sync up well with BC 23, where we talk about how we're going to do it. So what's the link? There needs to be a little bit more. Again, it's normal for us to evolve from a project brief to what we're doing in terms of how we're going to do it. So there's probably just a BC needed or reframing of BC 19 to link a little bit better with what we say in BC 23, 24 and onwards. Yeah, I see you nodding. Thanks.
Yeah, that's useful.
So back to the page flip. That brings us to the bottom of page 8 and into page 9, which runs us from BC 21 to BC 25. Not seeing any more comments. Now, Ian, we weren't planning on going further than the BCs. We just wanted to get through this initial part. But we have 5 minutes, so maybe we pause there. If there are any other comments that haven't been discussed on the communication location guidance or anything in general that anybody wants to share with staff now to take away and think about, we'd be happy to use the time, but no expectations that you've looked further.
Yep, Karen.
I probably sound a bit like a broken record on IPSAS 1 alignment, where I'm still struggling with the annex to the consultation paper that says that the accounts and statistical presentations are just fundamentally different and can never be aligned with the statement that says that they're broadly aligned. So I think we still need to reconcile that, because I still struggle with that. And whilst I've just used the word still, just a drafting point, we use the word still in a number of sentences. I'd just take it out because it seems quite defensive in terms of saying, it makes it sound like our information is not the best. So I would remove the word still, because it is the best. And so I would go down that line. So that I think we see that in a number of places. So I have got comments and other stuff, but if you're going through it again, we can pick that up in due course. So thank you.
So Karen, on comments, I think if you've got comments, it would be helpful to have those now, because we're not really going to have time to pick up a lot of detailed comments in the December meeting. I think it's interesting that you made the comment on consistency between the CP and the material here, because actually Rochua and I were in a briefing meeting with Thomas in terms of handover yesterday, and Thomas made exactly the same point. And I think therefore there is an action point to staff that actually they need to take this away, where there has been a lot of development in terms of the thinking over the last months, particularly through the task force workshop in July. And I think the point you're alluding to is exactly the same point that Thomas made, which is the CP on presentation is now out of line in terms of the discussion and the tone. Probably not in terms of the conclusions, but in terms of the way the argument is presented. And that, I think, if we give staff an instruction that when you see the CP back, it needs to be consistent with where this has got to going into the December meeting. So thank you for that. Ross, you want to come in before I go to Patricia?
Yeah, thanks. So just to say, to emphasize, Karen, if you do have specific comments on this or the consultation paper developing on presentation of financial statements, please share them and we'll make sure we have another look. Staff have been working together on this consistently, and Eileen and Joao were in the office together after this discussion, kind of following up and talking about how to link the two projects. So this is already working close. We don't work in silos in that sense. So we do communicate, but we try to share the developments in real time and make sure these two will link up. And on your points on some of the specific drafting, Karen, I think you've got some good points there. We'll make sure we take them away and just have a clean look and a clean read. Particularly on the GFS project, things have been moving relatively quick. So it probably does need a good scrub once we finalize the proposals that are going to the board in December, just to make sure that we're using our consistent wording and building off the principles that are already in the guidance. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. Patricia.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 comments, but I think I would like to talk with João offline to explain my points in deep. But the first point, I really appreciated the way that your question was organized, but sometimes the way that answers is elaborated is not in the same way. For example, when I have accounting policy choice, and in some questions the answer is about the additional information I need. come back to the text goes back to the accounting policy choice and indicate if it's not the entity does not make this choice, need to more information. In other cases, not. But you can indicate in the text. It's the way to answer. It's not in the same way for our questions. And the other point I need to talk, we need to discuss more with João, is because some conclusion about measurement is different in relation to different questions. For example, when I consider the conclusion about IPSAS 46 is different, the conclusion IPSAS about inventories and different in other IPSAS. And then I need more time to discuss this point with João too. This is my two main points about the text. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. I mean, many thanks for actually doing that more detailed review. And I think it would be very helpful for you to share those points with João, because obviously the task force has actually been doing a lot of work on this. But I think actually the fact that you've taken the time, it would be very good if you can share those comments. And similarly, if any other members or TAs have actually been through the rest of the material that we haven't covered today, but you do have specific thoughts and concerns, please do share those with João, because we do want to make sure that there is a very, a sort of polished product going into the December meeting. So many thanks for that. Okay. I think that's actually covered a lot of ground actually in the last 3 hours. So thank you very much to staff again for the material that you produced, but particularly thank you as well to board members and TAs. I think we've had a lot of great comments, and really appreciate, there's a lot of material to go through, but I think it's setting us up very well for the December board meeting. If you do, through the work that you've done preparing for the meeting, have additional minor editorials and so on that will need to be picked up as usual, please do pass those to staff. And I think with that, Ross, is there anything else we should be saying?
No, nothing else other than just thank you, members, TAs, for sharing all the information and engaging. I think this sets us up well for the important approvals we have in December. And any other final comments or edits that you want staff to consider, please send them through as soon as possible and we'll work on them. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ross. Scott, final comment.
Yes, I wanted to give a commercial for the SRG meeting next week, next Wednesday on the 5th. And guess what? We're going to talk about public policy programs. So anyway, we're going to use the SRG to start us down that next. So strongly encourage board members to come and listen to what the SRG is going to share with us. So there's my commercial.
That's great. Thank you very much, Scott. Yeah, the start of the next phase. So thank you very much, everyone. Great to see you all. Looking forward to seeing as many as possible in the New York meeting in only a few weeks' time. So look forward to that. And thanks very much, everybody, for great input today.